people. It's like Hollywood Squares.
So there will be two Beth Holbrooks this evening, one played by me and one played by Laura Hansen, our Director of Planning, just to give you a heads up.
We like the company.
Okay, Council, we're getting close. I'm just looking for, there's Jan. Okay. I think we've got a quorum.
John?
Beth, thanks for joining us.
All right, you are welcome. I was just fixing my screen so I had access to the latest information on some of those bills.
I'm watching those like a hawk. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Very much so.
Okay, Council, we're at 5:30. Thank you for joining us. This is the Roy City City Council meeting for March 22nd, 2021. It is 5:30 according to my clock. I want to welcome everybody who's on and those who may be listening. I understand we have a number of people who are watching YouTube at this moment and interested in some of the activity that will be taking place tonight. I'd like to recognize that we have Councilmember Burrell, Councilmember Saxton, Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Jackson, and Councilmember Paul with us today. I'd like to, if I can, I'd like to read a statement here in light of the fact that Roy City still has 98 active cases of COVID-19. And by the way, those numbers are reducing significantly, so we're moving in the right direction. I'd like to read this statement. I, Mayor Robert Dandoy, in accordance with Utah Code Section 52-2-207, 4, have determined that conducting a meeting in the Roy City Council chambers presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who would present at the City Council chambers. And the basis of this determination is due to the infectious nature and potentially dangerous health effect of contracting the COVID-19 virus. There is not sufficient space in the council chambers to provide appropriate, safe physical distancing for the safety of individuals who would attend. Accordingly then, March 2nd, 2021, this meeting will be held electronically without an anchored location. So with that, again, we welcome you, appreciate you joining us tonight. If you would you join me in a moment of silence and then a pledge of allegiance. Thank you. If you would, Joe Paul has the flag, if you don't mind standing, and we'll give a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Council, we do have some consent items. Approval of the December 1st, 2020 Roy City Council work session minutes, the February 2nd, 2021 Roy City Council meeting and work session minutes, and the November 17th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes, as well as the sale of a couple of surplus vehicles. So with that, Council, any comments or concerns or questions relative to the minutes or to the surplus vehicles? Okay, hearing none, then do I have a motion then to approve the consent items?
Mayor, if somebody can make that motion to approve the consent items with the changes that were made.
Yes, there were changes that were provided. So yes, thank you. So if you would make approval to approve the consent items with the changes that were provided to the city.
I propose we accept the consent items with noted changes.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Paul, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay,
Jan
Jan,
can second it.
Jan, thank you for seconding it. This is an all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, thank you. We do have some presentations we would like to start with. Mr. Becker, I believe you're from Zions. So you're going to help us with some marketing ideas and studies. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Wilson, I believe you invited Mr. Becker to join us and talk about some things. So we look forward to hearing what you have. If you need to share the screen, if you have charts and stuff like that, please work those with Morgan. We'll see if we can't make that happen tonight. But please give us your thoughts and your feelings about marketing studies.
Great. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Roy City Council. It's good to be here. And it's all, I have always thought one Beth Holbrook's good. It looks like we have 3 Beth Holbrooks on the phone. So that's fun. Hopefully you can see my screen there. Is that?
Perfect. Thank you.
So Councilmember Wilson just asked me to share a couple of impacts or a couple of considerations for retail studies and what's important in a retail study, and maybe some ideas for Roy in the future as you're going forward. I know is some significant decisions on your commercial market, but I just want to give you an overview of what we think is important in the retail market now and some key considerations for studies that might be important for you in the future. So these questions, where is money being spent? Which retail sectors present opportunities? Which areas of a city are key retail spots? Understanding the impact of retail versus other uses, understanding current retail trends, and then what are key drivers for new retail. And I'll try to fly through these slides, so don't get too discouraged. But really, an essence of a basis of a retail study is a sales leakage study. And to understand where it is that your community fits within an overall region. So here's just an example of a previous study looking at some Salt Lake County cities, understanding their total taxable sales, their population, and then what that means on a per capita basis. So just a quick notice from this, you can look and see that Murray does really well on a per capita basis, where maybe a place like Riverton doesn't have quite as established of a retail sector, certainly not Harriman. They're growing first more residentially, and then eventually you would anticipate that the commercial would follow. If you look in these columns going to the right, and I recognize there's a lot of data points here, but they each have their own importance. We then begin to understand what Murray, where they're doing well. They're doing very well in terms of motor vehicle parts and dealers. You can see that on a per capita basis, what they're doing compared to the county-wide average, and the difference they have from the county. Whereas Murray might look at this and say, you know, from a food and beverage store perspective, we are not doing overly well. We might have opportunities there. So when you would look at these numbers for Roy and surrounding communities and Weber and Davis County, you'd want to see who's doing well, where there might be opportunities, really understanding your competition. Here's from another perspective too. These are some Utah County cities. Anything that is above 100% says that a community is capturing more than what the average community should be spending in that category. Anything that's below 100% says that your residents are going elsewhere to spend their money. For that example, American Fork, you can see that they are capturing a significant amount of dollars from other cities in the motor vehicle category. And as you can see, some of these other cities that are near American Fork are below 100%, suggesting that their residents are going to American Fork to spend their dollars. Conversely, from a food and beverage perspective, American Fork residents might be going to some of these other communities to spend some of their money. So again, very important to know, particularly for Roy, do you have opportunities for gasoline stations, or do you have opportunities within the sporting, hobby, and music subcategory? And then we'll show you in a little bit how those break down into even more individual categories. These these retail leakage studies are important in that they show where opportunities exist, and they let you know which retailers are doing well. These are specific numbers from a city where, just for confidentiality reasons, I had to take off the names of the retailers. But just imagine here, it could be something like a Walmart or a Smith's or a Chick-fil-A or whatever it might be, to understand what's your retailers, who are your top retailers, and making sure that you understand their long-term vitality in the city. This is a specific city within northern Utah. And as you can see here, their top 3 retailers are really generating a significant amount more than really the bottom, half of their retailers, the bottom, the other top retailers. So if you lose one of these top 2 or 3 retailers, you really could have a significant impact on the taxable sales generation for the city and city budgets. So it's really understanding where is the disbursement of your retail. Again, here I had to cross out the retailers just for confidentiality, but you can see in this scenario, their total taxable sales, what type of sales tax that was to the city, and then understanding it just from an overall land usage perspective, I think is important. How many acres, their sales per acre, and the direct to city per acre. So while this store, which being 25 acres might be some sort of supercenter type user, they create pretty notable sales tax impacts. But on a per acre basis, if this were to be sorted, they're sort of in the lower half here. Where here you've got a retailer generating quite a bit on a per acre basis. Obviously, it's a small retailer. So really understanding what it is that your retailers are doing, who are these key components of your city. Within that sales leakage study, it really will break things out into a more finite basis. Now, this would be very much understanding the nuances of your city. And as you can see here in the motor vehicle and parts dealers, you can understand that, are we doing well with our used car dealers? And in this community, certainly they are. Automotive parts, they're doing very well. You can see for home furnishing stores, this community is doing very well, but from furniture stores, and these are different codes that state tax gives to the retailers, you can see that there might be the opportunity there there might be an opportunity there. Building material, this is a community that has a Home Depot. They're doing quite well there. You can see though, from a food and beverage store category, they're not doing well in grocery stores, specialty food stores, beer, wine, and liquor stores. Anyways, for each of the different categories, and there are 19 different NICS codes, or those are the categories from a retail perspective, they're broken down into subcategories, and you begin to really see where it is that your residents are spending money or where money is being spent within your community. A next step to that, to really understand this, because at the end of the day, data is only as good as the story that it tells us. So if we begin to take the data on a much more micro level, and we look at where is it that this is occurring within the city, then we can map this data and say, all right, these are our key retail centers. How much of our total overall taxable sales are being generated by this one commercial center? And that will really help you in your land planning decisions, knowing, do we want to go forward? Do we want to remove retail from this area? Do we want to add retail to this area? As you can see in this community, 44% of their retail is occurring kind of at this main development here. And when you add that with this other 23%, a real significant chunk of this community's retail is happening along a few block corridor of this, or a few block area of this corridor. So if this area suffers because of construction maybe, or competitive developments, you're going to see significant changes in this taxable sales. This is actually an area where a new freeway is planned. And so this area right now that is not generating a significant portion of, and from a percentage perspective, this may now have new opportunities in the future, this land to generate sales tax because it'll have better accessibility. Whereas there'll be a little bit of concern about this area over here and its ability to continue to generate that. This map below takes it on an even more micro basis and says, why is it that these areas are generating certain amounts? When you start to look at property tax values in each of these areas and to see where opportunities exist. The color coding, and I did not include the legend here for you, but the color coding would show you the different range in values on a per acre basis. So you could look at an intersection like this and say, this intersection has similar characteristics on each corner, similar visibility and exposure, but for some reason, 2 of the corners are much more highly valued than the other 2 corners. We might have redevelopment potential here. We know from our retail sales leakage study that we can support a drugstore or a pharmacy. Maybe this is an area where we want to take a look at our zoning to see if we're prohibiting something like that, or we want to work closely with the developer to promote certain types of retail uses, or we want to look at economic development tools that maybe could get the type of development here that we want. I think it's important to understand that how much the retail trends are changing. We'll talk about this in a minute, but when you're looking at opportunities for your city, this is Heber City, and this is where retail sales were occurring in 1997. And this is a 1997 map. Apparently we didn't have color back then, but really right along the Main Street corridor, right? And this is where everybody would do their shopping. And this is where the grocery store was, and little mom and pop places. And if we fast forward to 2015, we have color now, and we still have our retail sales occurring along this same corridor. They've expanded a little bit into sort of a super center area, but if you looked at the taxable sales to Heber City from retailers, the main percentage of it is still occurring from this area. If we jump to 2020, suddenly those circles have changed. We still have that Main Street area, but now all these residential units from people sitting in their homes and using Amazon and all sorts of online retailers are generating sales tax to their homes. Now that's good for your city in the sense that where you maybe were leaking to other cities in the past, now your residents, if they're more inclined to buy that online, those sales tax are going to you in Roy. Now, the converse of that is obviously true, in that if people were coming to Roy before, maybe they're doing that now in South Ogden from their home or wherever it might be. So, but this is a consideration of, as you look at your retail centers, to recognize the pressure on these centers, that the convenience of the home now is a competition. So what is it that's driving them to the key retail areas? And that is a part of these retail studies, to really understand the characteristics that are going to bring people from outside of the area, or to make additional purchases that they wouldn't make in their homes, to have an experience, to feel a sense of place and community in some of these other areas. A key consideration also is understanding the impact of retail versus other uses. So when we often talk about highest and best use, and highest and best use is a fundamental component of every analysis. And highest and best use really has 3 components, or three audiences, we'll say. The first is usually looked at just from the eyes of the developer. What creates the greatest return to the land? If a developer can get a greater return on product X over product Y, they'll choose product X because it creates a greater return. And you certainly can't fault the developer for that, because that's their job, is creating desirable, feasible developments. But highest and best use should also be looked at from the perspective of the city, from a fiscal impact perspective, to understand what are these proposed developments generating to us as a city. And then also from a third perspective is to the community, to the residents. They may not care what the return is to the developer or the fiscal impacts to the city, but there are impacts of, does this create more walkability for me? Does this create more green space? Does this provide the restaurant that I want in our city? So this is a look here at the second option, from really looking at those fiscal impacts to the city. And here you can see we've just taken a variety of use types and shown what the total total value of these product types are. Their assessed values, which the assessed values typically differ from the total value, particularly with residential. And then this is just taking a sample city, the property taxes and the property taxes per acre. If we look at one more slide, this combines those previous numbers, and we add a couple of different things. We add sales taxes from the retail. Now we're seeing some sales tax again from residential. A population distribution, again, this is sales tax from the state based on your population. It's a per capita distribution from the state. We look at municipal energy fees. You start to see the difference in these property types on a per acre basis. Now, multifamily, you have to feel comfortable with the level of density. Single family, you can have a wide variety of densities. So recognize this is just one of many possible points. There's only so much retail that you can support. I mean, here you're looking at 10,000 square feet. Again, this is all taken on a per acre basis though. There's only so much retail that can be supported in relation to multifamily, but it's an important consideration to know that are we pushing for a use type that ultimately is not going to create the greatest returns for us as a city? And there are also then the additional impacts that you need to consider from different types of units, different types of residential development. What does this do in terms of potential new residents or the potential total employees or the potential total vehicles that will be in a neighborhood? And this is an important consideration. This considers a little bit more that third criteria of highest and best use, the impact to your residents. And are we going to be flooded with more people, flooded with cars? Will more people translate into the city creating more parks or trails, things like that? Now, sorry, we're shifting gears all over the place here, but trying to run this through quickly, knowing that this is a city council meeting. The understanding the impact of retail versus other uses can also be taken down to a more finite level of understanding the impact of specific types of retailers. Now here I've shown a study that we did for the city of Syracuse. This would be applicable to any city, these same amounts, because you all get 1/2 of 1% from retailers. Now, I've just picked out a variety of tenants. These are not tenants that are in Syracuse or any specific community, but these are their typical sales per square foot in Utah. Some Costco's are well above this. Some Burger Kings are well above this. Some are below this. But you can see what they're doing on a square foot basis and their total fiscal impact to a city. This is just taking our sales tax revenue. So you may feel really excited about, hey, we got that, Burger King or Wendy's. Was that really ultimately what we wanted to push for, when maybe something a little bit larger would not only, maybe it's a little bit better food, but also triple or quadruple the sales tax impact. Here you can see it on sales tax generated per square foot. Quite a big difference. Now, Shopko, I recognize, is no longer. You can see why Shopko is no longer. They essentially occupy the same type of parking lots and big buildings as Costco. They're a little bit smaller. But look at the difference in that for your city. Having a Costco and a Shopko, or even just a Walgreens and some of these others. Very important to understand the overall impact of these retailers to your city. Just out of curiosity, I've looked at a lot of different retailers. The highest retailer that you can find on a per square foot basis, at least that would be off of Saks Fifth Avenue, off of Fifth Avenue, would be the Apple Store, and they do about 25 square feet, dollars per square foot. Compare that to these others. Lululemon does really well. Chick-fil-A does really well. Trader Joe's does really well. In understanding those, back to this, and understanding what they generate, it's also important to understand what are their criteria. And all of these retailers have very sophisticated criteria of where they want to be located. They know, for example, Bed Bath & Beyond, who also is going through some struggles. they are very specific in knowing that they want a certain percentage of women who are ages 30 to 35 and are college educated and have 1.8 children, because that fits their mold. And so they will look for areas that have an excess of those characteristics compared to other areas. And that's an area where they will look for specific sites. And we've got these for hundreds of retailers, just the criteria that they have, what they go through when they look for sites. Which brings us a little bit to some of these current retail trends. And this is an important part of any retail study, is understanding trends. And there never has been a time that's more important to understand trends than really the last year, right? And we've just seen a complete disruption of the retail market, of office markets, residential. And in the year 2000, most of the Wasatch Front was being built at about 25 square feet per capita with retail space. That's just kind of what we were building. That's what a lot of communities are now built as. By about 2017, the thought was, boy, a lot has moved online and people are doing more and more online. In about 2017, about 12% of total sales was being done online, and that was taking away from this need of retail space. And that's why you begin to see all these large big box stores that just remain empty. These CompUSA or Best Buy buildings, or a bunch of these 20 to 60,000 square foot retailers who get filled up for the month of October with a Halloween store, and the rest of the time they're pretty much vacant, right? Well, that trend has really quickly, what's the right word? It's accelerated significantly during COVID, as you can imagine, with the change in online sales. And the projections in 2017, 2018 were that by 2030, we would be doing about 20 to 25% of all retail sales be done online. So we eclipsed that at about 26% during the pandemic in 2020. Now, if we go back to, we may see a little bit of inching back off that. People may get out more during the Christmas holiday season this year and do more shopping in person. But there are some trends and some convenience and some ease of deliverability, things like that, that have occurred that have significantly shaped that market. And so we may not see that. So the concern here is that if you're a city with a current population of 35,000, in 2000, assuming here a static population, you would essentially need about 875,000 square feet of true retail space. You can see how that has changed. In 2020, with that same population, you would really only need about 525,000 square feet. That difference, that almost 300 plus thousand square feet, that's what you're seeing in the retail vacancies in a lot of these cities. Or you're going to see this year, as we are anticipating record numbers of store closures. We're also seeing record number of store openings, but they're happening in a different scale and scope than some of these that are closing. And anyways, that would be something in any retail study to really understand, where is it that your closings are going to occur in your city? Where are those Class B locations that no longer can support retail because the pressures of not only being a Class B location, but the pressures of online sales and retail changing trends are sufficient enough that that can't support retail, and it has a different highest and best use from a developer perspective, and it ultimately just needs to be repurposed. Significant changes in trends. Retailers want flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Drive-throughs were, the bane of every planning department for so many years, and now retailers say, we want drive-throughs, we want accessibility, we want pickup. Restaurants, sit-down restaurants, are recognizing that at some point people will be able to return more fully to restaurants, but the convenience of pickup and Uber Eats, things like that, has made them shift their amount of floor dining space to a little bit more of kitchen space and pickup and delivery space. And what's really popular are things like ghost kitchens, where a restaurant can rent a much, much cheaper space in sort of a light industrial neighborhood or a flex office area, make all the food, everything can be completely sanitary. There's no retail dining space, and it's just simply a kitchen in order to facilitate deliveries. You're seeing more and more parking spaces that want to be dedicated to pickup. This graph should have come earlier on online sales. These are a lot of the retailers in Utah who have done very, very well during the pandemic. They're also very well established national names with much more, financially deep pockets, but they've been able to adapt, whether it's through pickup or Home Depot really thought that the ceiling was going to crash. That's probably not a good pun for Home Depot, but in, March and April, where they were surprised that everyone decided they wanted to be the home repair experts, and they've had record-breaking years. Amazon, record-breaking year, Costco, same thing. In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A, they figured the model far better than anybody else in terms of fast food pickup delivery. In-N-Out realized years and years ago that if people could drive through the drive-through and actually see their food in a very clean environment, there was something reassuring about that. And it was the closest that you could get to a greasy hamburger being fresh food and being clean. And that has really worked well for them. They've also, while Chick-fil-A hasn't necessarily opened up their windows, they've figured out the drive-through. They have figured out how to get people right up to your car to facilitate people, getting through the drive-through space quicker. In-N-Out has done that. Or you can go to other places and feel like you're sitting in a drive-through forever, or you come up to a window and there's somebody behind a glass door and you feel like you're just handing over dirty money and they're handing back. And there's a process there that hasn't been figured out, that a couple of retailers have had banner years because they understood those trends. We're almost done here. Hang in, 2 more slides. Key drivers for new retail. Class A locations. Secondary locations will ultimately be repurposed. And this is where a good retail study would be able to show you those secondary locations and those good Class A locations. And Class A locations are going to show healthy median incomes, strong daytime populations, healthy traffic counts, and a growing residential population. Where are units planned? Is the populace aging notably? I mean, you'll see that retailers all the time are asking West Side, Salt Lake County cities, where are the new developments coming in? How many development units do you have planned for the next 5 years? We want to acquire land now because we see that's where the growth is occurring. And if you look at age maps for Salt Lake County, you'll see in terms of household sizes or median ages and median household sizes, it's a major pattern of older ages and smaller household sizes. That doesn't mean the size of your house, but how many people in the house. As you move east to west, you start moving out towards Harriman and West Jordan, you get 4 to 5 people per household, and median age is closer to 26 to 30. When you're on the east bench there of Salt Lake County and you're getting in excess of 35, 40 on terms of median ages and household sizes that are 2 or fewer, that's a big deal for retailers. And they want to see where that growth is going to occur. They want to know that there is a plan for maybe additional density or new units that's going to revitalize the populace. What is working well for retail, again, as we stress this or talk about this in those trend slides, flexibility, flexible designs, drive-throughs, multiple use types. This is particularly important in mixed use buildings, that the consideration has to be made that if this first floor, if it's going to be vertical mixed use, there needs to be flexibility of design. That if it is a clothing store initially, and the clothing store goes out of business, and a restaurant wants to come in there, the building might not have the building systems in order to handle the ventilation or the gas lines or whatever is needed for that restaurant. So flexibility in those initial designs to provide for a variety of potential retailers, that's key on mixed use. This proximity to strong residential and employment support, and then what's working for retail, mixed use, both vertical and horizontal. Again, your horizontal and vertical obviously having different uses above you, horizontal suggesting a development that's got retail spread out throughout the development along with multiple uses, but really requiring this flexibility. the retail can't be an afterthought in these mixed use projects. There has to be consideration for its sense of place, its design, its ease of parking. But boy, these retailers certainly are saying, we want access to population. We want access to whether it's daytime population or nighttime population. And so you're seeing them really want to locate where there is the potential for residential growth. Particularly now as we're considering that more and more people are looking at home as an option for employment, working out of their office. Where is it easy for them to walk during the day to get a sandwich, things like that. The last slide here is probably a different, more extended topic. You've got, Randy Sand, who knows this inside and out, the potential economic development tools for retail. You got your public infrastructure districts, a fairly new tool in Utah, and then community reinvestment areas, redevelopment areas. You're aware of these, I'm sure, as a city, but really understanding the but-for argument that's being made, where it is that a gap can be made, and understanding the difference between a proposed plan B and a plan A alternative for a developer. How is it that you get the vision that you want from a retail or mixed use perspective by using some of these tools? And with that, I'm going to stop talking so much. Any questions?
Wow, very impressive. That's probably, to be honest with you, Mr. Becker, that's probably the most comprehensive leakage study I've ever heard. You did it in probably about 15 minutes. That was really, really well said. Council, thoughts, questions? Let me just give you a preface to that. 6 years ago, actually in 2014, Royce City had a leakage study done. Nothing to the depth and breadth that Mr. Becker talked about tonight, but it was done. Maybe the conversation when this is done would be, is it time for us to relook at that, consider a new one, so we can use that as a template in terms of where we move forward. But with that, any questions from Mr. Becker relative to what he presented today?
Great presentation. I appreciate your efforts.
Yes, I thank you very much, Mr. Becker. That was excellent. Something that the citizens and all of us can use. And I was just wondering, as you look at these studies, what are some of the better ways? How do we know if the lower areas in our retail leakage are feasible for our city? Like some of those areas, they needed more food but their auto industry was really high. For us, we've got some neighboring communities that have some of the businesses we might like, but how do we, from all of this, sort out what is feasible, even though we might need it or want it? And that's one of the questions I have.
Sure, that's a great question. And just because you're leaking in a certain category doesn't necessarily mean that it's an opportunity that is feasible for your community. So when you are leaking in a category, it's important to then go and map within the overall competitive market, where are those competitors? If you're leaking, let's say on home repair places, you'd go and look at the Lowe's and the Home Depot and Ace and all the hardware places and mark those on a map and start to understand their characteristics. They're drawing from the radius that would be around them. How many people are they drawing from? And if there's a hole in there, just from a geographical perspective, then that is your first suggestion that there may be an opportunity. And then looking at how many units are you planning on adding, or populace, or daytime residents, or daytime employees through new population growth. And is that enough to change the needle in order to entice one of these retailers to maybe either relocate or to expand their operations? So it's going back to those slides of what do these retailers need? Is that being accommodated within their current circles? Or do we now present a circle based on our proposed growth? And I mean, for you, a huge thing in Roy is going to be these new jobs that sound like they're pretty desirable income jobs. That's going to shape and shift the retail market, not only for you, but for a lot of your surrounding retailers. So knowing those data points, that would be a next step. And that's those are fairly straightforward circles to be able to draw. There are a lot of different programs that can pull that data. And hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, great, great answer. Let me just ask you one other question along that same line. To develop, Mr. Becker, a comprehensive citywide retail leakage study as you defined it, how long would that typically take?
It's not, they're not overly complex in order to create. It depends on how much, to do the retail leakage, that part of where you're leaking and who your top retailers are, that's not an overly complex process. That's, maybe a month by the time the data is requested from state sales tax and it's combed through. The real key part there is looking then and mapping that and saying, these are the areas that are doing well. And another map that I should have shown you is that those retailers, what are they generating on a per square foot basis? So you could say, wow, this area where we have our Harmons and these restaurants, they're generating on average $400 a square foot. These retailers that are several blocks away, they're generating $175 a square foot. What are the difference between the two areas? That's the step where then it's really sitting down with city leaders and saying, what is it that you know about this area? Is it proposed for new growth? Is the ownership here just reticent to do any type of new improvements? Why is it that this area, besides the data points that we can see, whether it's reduced traffic counts or reduction in median incomes or access to population, why is it that this area is suffering a little bit more? So to have a real comprehensive approach, you'd want to make sure there's a lot of input from city leaders and your city staff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, my really long answer to your short question is, probably 2-3 months. Sorry.
So what do you feel about office space? Because I know most of my family is working from home, might not ever go back to an office. So do you feel that's going to come back? Because like you say, retail, besides me, most of my family shops from Amazon. Well, I like to actually go to a store. But what do you feel about office space coming back?
Boy, I wish I know. I will tell you, it's been a lonely 10 months in this building. But I really like having the floor to myself. It's quiet. And I can sing if I want to. No one hears it, which is a really good thing. But our whole building, I look at that every day and think, boy, we're 18 stories here. And I don't know, maybe there are 10 employees in the building and there's nobody here on my floor. And I look across the buildings to me, and the people who are eating in downtown are all the construction workers. And there are a lot of construction workers, thank goodness, right now. It's a tricky question to say what's going to happen. I will say home buyers right now are being inundated with requests from developers to change models and change designs to include separate office space. And they want office space that's really separated from where the kids are playing the piano. It's not, it's a whole separate type. So we're going to move into this direction of even facilitating more the convenience of working at home. I would be concerned if I had a lot of, near-term expiring leases as a landlord, that companies may decide to downsize. And if they're taking 100,000 square feet, maybe 50,000 works in the future, and maybe you can stagger your people. I do think there's a great need for collaboration and for people to see each other, but we've been able to figure that out fairly well via Zoom. And I had an in-person meeting today in a city that was quite a ways away, and I thought, I kind of wish this was being done on Zoom because it's taking 2 hours of driving. But so I wish there was a great answer for you. I do know that there is, in the lending industry, there's concern about going forward with office development at present. And Utah is in a very good position compared to a lot of other states. We're in a very enviable position in terms of our overall economy and our ability to attract office users. But I think that the office market presents itself some concern, and we may have particularly a fair amount of kind of Class B space that does not get filled in for quite some time. But again, I'm sure there are developers who are going to have their differing opinions from that.
Thank you.
I've got another question in regards to the future that you were talking about. You got these trends that are going. What are some of the best ways for you to look into the future, for those future opportunities? you kind of hit a little bit on it, and I was just wondering, how do you pull that together, or what is it that you're using to help with those predictions of the future for opportunity?
Yeah, I think was it Doc Brown that used the flux capacitor in Back to the Future? I think that's the only version, but no, there are, in trying to look at the future, because there's nothing like this in history in terms of precedence of what this has shifted. I mean, this has been a major shift. So anything that we suggest going forward, there's a lot of subjectivity and conjecture. It's trying as best we can to see how markets are moving, where the lending markets are considering money, where they see risk, where rates associated with different investments, where they're increasing. That's kind of like like when they do sports betting, the line changes on a game as more and more intel comes forward that this quarterback might be a little bit injured, so the line changes a little bit. Well, it's kind of a little bit the same with some of the financial and the real estate markets, is understanding the rates of return that are associated with the risk of that development. When those begin to change and we see those moving in different directions, it gives you an understanding of where investors feel a sense of too great of risk or reduced risk in these different sectors. We try to watch as closely as we can. I mean, it's historical data, but the sales tax data that comes in each month to see how different sectors are doing. It's been fascinating this whole year to watch what has happened to sales tax data. I'm guessing, I won't speak for UTA, I know they're on the phone, but I'm guessing in March, April, they had significant concerns about sales tax data, what was going to happen. And it's been a banner year for sales tax data. People have spent remarkable amounts of money, and year over year, month over month, sales tax projections have been really good for almost every place. Now, I think you have to take that data and be able to project it forward. We've seen that cities that normally were leaking money before COVID are now capturing money. And cities like Salt Lake City and Farmington, who had big retail attractions that were capturing money, they leaked a lot of money during 2020. And so you start to have to project a little bit of that forward, how that's going to influence their markets. But I wish I had a great answer for what it's going to look like in the future, but I think those are some of the indicators.
Thank you very much.
Brian, you have a question?
I do. I'm wondering, do you have any feel on where the theater industry is going, and are we ever going to return to those big crowds at the cinema?
Boy, we sure better. I miss big shows like that, and downtown here with like the Eccles Center and things like that. I think if you lump that market into the tourism, sort of hospitality, entertainment industry, that's the biggest, the biggest concern still in the market. Office is still this great unknown, and that's concern. Hotel, for example, hotel occupancy rates in the Salt Lake market most recently have been right around 20%. Now, some hotels like the Grand America and a couple other places have done better than that. But when the average is 20%, that is a real concern, particularly when you're looking historically at occupancy rates closer to 75, 76%. When you get above that range, you start saying, well, maybe we could build more hotels. When you drop below 70, you get really worried that, what's going on with the market. So we're at 20. And that market to me is very closely related to the entertainment. People either coming and going to shows. From a COVID perspective, I would assume that people, once vaccines are more widely distributed, people might start feeling more comfortable going back to major events. I think you can only keep people away from sporting events for so long. I would think movie theaters, while we may become accustomed now to our home type setup, there's still going to be a desire to get out. And maybe it's, maybe it looks a little bit different. Maybe it's more spaced, Maybe people still wear masks who, ultimately just don't feel comfortable with that. But I think we've got to return at some point to some of these big, large events and theater, and it's just too much of our livelihood, our blood, that there has to be an expression of creativity. We can't let Netflix determine all of our imagination for us.
Mr. Becker, this is Carl Marino. I'm the police chief. Does any of your data take in and factor the increase in crime in certain types of area versus the amount of revenue it brings in?
Yeah, when we look at those fiscal impacts to the city from different use types, what we showed there was from a revenue perspective, but what you're suggesting is also from an expense perspective.
Exactly.
And calls to service to a Walmart are significantly higher than an office development, or specific types of residential neighborhoods, different densities or values end up being more calls to service. So from a police perspective, I imagine that's of great concern to you. And yes, we do look at that. We look at overall impact. And that was just simply a revenue shot there. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Okay, council, anything else for Mr. Becker? Okay, hey, great presentation. Thank you. I don't know if the charts that you provide are available to us, but you brought some really interesting perspectives. If you would you consider maybe let us look at that, and council, in light of the presentation and the depth and breadth of what he was talking about, we'd like to, at the Economic Development Committee, we'd like to basically come back to the council or the RDA board and make a proposal that maybe we need to have an updated leakage study as we move forward. I think there's some really good benefits that can come out of that. So we'll get our heads together, make some recommendations, and then present that to the council for consideration and funding. So something to consider. Okay, Diane, another question?
Benj, I just wanted to thank you for volunteering your time and taking all your time to present it as well as to create it. It was very helpful for us, and we appreciate your generosity. Thank you again for your time and everything.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me be with you tonight.
Yeah, well done. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Excellent, excellent. Okay, we do have UTA trustee Beth on with us. She's going to talk to us about the 5-year service plan that they're working with. So Beth, if you'd like to share your thoughts with us, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. It's an interesting dynamic. I think Benj does a great job of pulling in all of this data. And one of the data points that he last talked about was, what is it going to look like, moving forward? And of course, it is all a bit speculative right now. But one of the things that I miss is going to actual council meetings, because that's the last time I saw all of you in person. And the thing that we really take a look at, just to kind of grab a microcosm of his discussion, is what changes in behavior, because that's really what is driving some of the dialogue, not just through transit, but through other things as well, including development, and how is that going to look moving forward. And so with that, I wanted to thank you for this again. And I wanted to talk about what we are doing with our 5-year service plan. And the service plan is designed for the bus system. Oh, thank you, Laura. And Laura is also here. She's our director of planning, although she is under my name. I wanted to tell Benj that I usually travel with an entourage, but I knew he had to get going, so I didn't get a chance to tell him. One of the key things, and I know everyone recognizes this, is that we are having extraordinary growth. The sales tax revenue that Ben spoke about, that we take a look at, because we're funded through that, those all reflect this development and this growth that the state is continuing to experience, especially along the Wasatch Front, where 80% of the population currently resides. As you can see by the little bar chart on the right of your screen, that is population. And what we anticipate, and based on the data, is that this is going to become a significantly more crowded state moving forward. And as you know, the economic footprint isn't just along the Wasatch Front, but obviously Roy City is. And some of those key growth areas that have a lot of businesses going in, that's really going to have an impact on the future. And that's what we are trying to take a look at. As you know, transit, we try to look at things that the value given for the investment from our communities. And one of the biggest, or two of the biggest ones really, are the air quality components. The diminishing of congestion is obviously a key goal to do anything when you are looking at a geographically constrained location. Another thing that we are looking at doing with this is our first 5-year service plan, by the way, and we look at access to economic growth and opportunity. Those are the things that I think are going to be really critical moving forward. Where people live matters, and where they get access to growth and opportunity, and you know, to also develop that further, where they go to have, you know, live their lifestyle and other elements. Those are going to be really key moving forward. Next slide, please. We wanted to emphasize this, and I'm just going to say Mayor Dandoy has just done Roy City just an amazing job in the short amount of time that I've been in this role. I've seen him operate, and he has been at every meeting, and he knows what people are looking at and how we're trying to figure out what we can do to continue to partner. And with that, I want to let the council know that UTA wants to make sure that we're partnering with you. And we believe that if you are updating your general plans, if you're looking at streets, if there's a development that's coming on board, these are the questions that we want to be involved in. And we recognize that Front Runner is a development opportunity there, but we also look at our major transportation corridors for our bus routes. And that's part of this dialogue. For instance, Hooper and West Point, you know, they're developing rapidly. And those areas are going to start to look at not just single families, but they're also going to look at those same amenities that people are talking about. I want to have a grocery store that's relatively accessible to me. I don't want to have to commute to my grocery store. Those are the things that we want to take a look at, because when we can be a partner with you guys, we can help understand and develop our strategies based on where you're locating your more denser developments. We also look at that from service changes, bus stop changes, locations or amenities. And we just want to make sure that we help you in the best way that we can. Move next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this over to Laura. She has worked really hard on this. Again, she's our director. Laura Hansen is our director of planning. And this is what she is proposing, and that the local advisory council, as well as the board of trustees, has just passed this model moving forward.
Thank you, trustee, mayor, and members of the council. It's nice to spend some time with you here today. As trustee Holbrook mentioned, we have just adopted our very first 5-year service plan. And just to help you visualize what a 5-year service plan is and where it fits within the overall planning process, this is just really one step in a whole larger regional planning process that really begins with the development of the RTP with Wasatch Front Regional Council. And UTA will be working to develop its own long-range transit plan, which basically complements the RTP, but includes all of the local service, things like local bus, microtransit that wouldn't otherwise end up in the RTP. Create this compatible kind of 30-year vision for public transit. The 5-year service plan, if that's the long-range plan, think of the 5-year service plan as kind of our short-range plan. This is fiscally constrained. It's based on the resources that we have today and what we think we can do with immediate information to improve our service. But despite the fact that we've just adopted this, we have so much work to do still. Any of the concepts that are presented in the draft 5-year service or in the final service plan at this point will be reaching out to you as local governments and to our riders to get a lot more feedback on those, do some additional analysis, have public hearings, and make sure that it's really the right change before we implement any of those within our annual operations planning and change day process. So lots of opportunities to come still. This is a quick overview of our 5-year service plan, and I will make sure that you all have a link so that I think it's further in the slide so you can access this and navigate it and explore it on your own. But the plan is really organized around a series of guiding framework elements, and the first of which is system-wide planning. In this plan, we've really taken a concerted look at system-wide regional connectivity, so county to county travel, as well as mode to mode travel. So you can transfer from front runner to local bus really seamlessly. We've proposed the implementation of a network of core routes. So these are our very, very best bus services. They run early in the morning, late in the evening, 7 days a week, 15 minutes or better. And this is something that we'd like to expand over time as resources allow. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen some shifts in travel patterns. We talked a little bit earlier today about people teleworking and are people going to be commuting to an office anymore? One thing that we have found throughout the pandemic is that we've seen a lot of people that continue to depend on public transit. I can work from home sometimes, but I sure need a checker at the grocery store when I go to buy my groceries. And a lot of them rely on public transit. And so we're implementing in this plan a lot more all-day service to really meet the needs of people who work on shifts or some of those essential workers. Similarly, we've been proposed expanding our hours to run earlier in the morning and later in the evening so that you'll always have a ride whenever you need it. We're exploring some new technologies such as microtransit and seeing how that might fit into our portfolio of services in places where it might meet the needs of the community a little bit better. And we're also laying the foundation for some new capital projects, starting to realign bus service in anticipation of the implementation of those. And this is a map of the current service in Roy City. You can see that there's a number of routes. Those blue lines mean that they run every 30 minutes or more. The red lines are peak hour service. We have 2 routes, 456 and 472 that right now they don't actually have stops within Roy, but they serve your community. Both of those have been suspended right now because we've seen really low ridership on them due to the pandemic. We're continuing to watch the data and we'll bring those back on or an equivalent service depending on what the data shows as people start to rebound. And with that, I will pass it back to Trustee Holbrook. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. One of the things that we're also working on doing is making bus stop improvements. We've done 8 bus stop improvements since 2016, as you can see, and we do have 4 more scheduled for improvements for this year. And there's some other elements that I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides that kind of dovetail with that. Next slide, please. One of the things that we are looking at doing is improving the frequency on our current route, the 470. So the 470 is going to Ogden, and that is a really well-traveled, it goes further beyond, but it goes right through Roy City and continues on down south to Salt Lake City. This has been a really well-used route, and we're looking at ways that we can continue to develop that. We're also, as Laura mentioned, considering realigning service on Route 604 to better fit the needs of travelers or riders, I should say. We're also, of course, looking at front runner improvements, improvements to the bus service connecting to the station. We know that that's a really key element. We do understand that the development that's going on around Hill Air Force Base with Northrop Grumman, those people need to get access, and we have to figure out a strategy to connect them to our fixed routes as well as make that connectivity as seamless as possible. I will talk about the front runner improvements discussion piece at the end. So if you have any questions, just go for that. But next slide, and I'll continue that in a second. This is from the WFRC Long Range Transportation Plan. And as you can see, there's a lot of different colors on here. So the red lines basically indicate a phase 1 model of increased service and access to transit. And again, as Laura mentioned, that frequency, we have really found that there's not as much of a peak anymore. The service actually being consistent and constant throughout the day has really picked up as just in this relatively short time of this pandemic. And then the blue dotted line, as you can see, is also a phase 2 product that includes the front runner discussion, and I'll talk about that later on at the end. And then phase 3 is the green line, and that's continued connectivity and or even other things such as microtransit. Next slide, please. So this is our long range transit plan, and this is what we are developing, and we want to make sure that this is obviously compatible with what the MPOs are looking at doing as well. The long range plan will include the vision that is articulated through WFRC and incorporating the bus service, bus stop improvements. Microtransit has been very successful in the short time that it was run as a pilot prior to COVID. And even during COVID, it has been picking up. Still, its top 5 locations as a microtransit pilot have been to, 4 of them have been to transit stops. And then the 5th one has been to a local retailer in that South Salt Lake County pilot. We do understand and acknowledge park and ride lots still provide that level of connectivity that people enjoy. And those have to be calculated in a way that we can maintain our access and develop it moving forward. Paratransit, van pool, facilities, garage and maintenance facilities. All of these are going to be incorporated within this plan. Next slide, please. So this is going to also identify additional funding and resources needed to kind of look at this vision and really figure out what are the key funding sources going to be will we need in order to get this accomplished. Federal funding, grants, TTIF, as you know, that was established in 2018, the state legislative appropriations, local funding, eventually there's the discussion about the 5th quarter sales tax option, and TRZ. I'll talk about TRZs a little bit at the end of this, and then transportation infrastructure districts. Again, another way of looking and capturing revenue that could potentially allow key developments in certain areas adjacent to transit or transportation stops. Next slide, please. So our long range vision, we recognize transit is going to help the Wasatch Front address growth issues moving forward. In the next 30 years, as you know, the population will of course grow, and we want to make sure that we're doing this in a cohesive system-wide vision plan that includes not just local communities, but the region, and then of course the entire system so that we can maximize that access. One of the things that we really found to be incredibly valuable pre-COVID is the front runner access and connecting to the BRT in Utah County called UVX. And as you might be aware, Ogden is getting ready to start their own BRT project. We're really excited to work with Ogden and WSU Weber State to really increase that connectivity piece. Access from the front runner on frequent, consistent bus routes heading throughout the city, but also to Weber State and McKay-Dee Hospital, we think is going to continue to add value in the northern region, the way that UVX has done for the southern region. Next slide, please. We also know that not every city is the same. And when we look at these things, when we look at your communities and we look at the connectivity of the adjacent communities, we want to make sure that we are doing what we can to provide access to your residents so that they can get where they need to go. We know that there's a community character that means a lot to the communities, and we want to incorporate our vision with your vision for public transit to help to get people where they're going. And we want to look at continued options and opportunities to partner with you moving forward. And then below, you can see our the link, the rideuta.com/service plan. you are welcome to go on that link and explore it in any way that you can. You'll find the maps, you'll find some of these other discussion pieces that we've already talked about. We'll definitely make sure that you get copies of these slides. And then last slide, please. And with that, here's our contact information. And I just wanted to, sorry, my dog decided to talk. I have my contact information as well as Laura's, who's our Director of Planning, and then our Regional General Manager, Andreas, as well as Carolyn Ganot. She is our Executive Director. And with that, I know that the mayor asked me a couple of questions, but I wanted to open it up for anyone to have questions on the presentation before I go into that last piece.
Council, do you have any questions for Laura or Beth?
I've got a question.
Please.
I was wondering, as you are looking forward to the advancements or the developments and the increased funding, are you doing that primarily on the ridership? You talked a little bit about location. How are you kind of making the decision to put in that kind of extended money for the infrastructure to be able to increase that? What are, I mean, there are a couple things you talked about, but I figure there must be a few more factors.
I'll leave that to Laura to answer some of those questions, but overall, one of the things that we are looking at doing is, as we look at the growth patterns, as I think I mentioned, there's several elements of funding that can be connected. And I'll just give you an example of the BRT in Ogden, and hopefully this answers some of your questions, but please feel free to, if I need to define it more, I will. So the Ogden BRT was a project that has funded from multiple sources. It was funded through Ogden City gave a portion, Weber County gave a portion, Weber State gave a portion. Theirs was in land, so kind of an in-kind, if you will, but still valuable. And then McKay-D, as well as UDOT, WFRC, we all kind of worked together to construct this type of BRT project. UTA gave money as well towards this. And then what we did is when we applied for the federal funding grant, we showed the local match, and that's where we came up with the entire funding for that project. And you can take that type of a funding model and put it onto other projects as well that have regional significance. We do have a couple of other BRTs that are, you know, well, maybe like a couple years behind the Ogden BRT model, and they're in that process as well, accumulating the local investment as well as the regional, i.e. the county, and then the federal and UTA as well. Does that help you? Or did I not quite get your question answered?
I think that was very helpful, but also then for your timing, because I know that that project has been in the works for a long time. How did you decide, okay, this is the time, this is when I think this project's going to be successful, we're going to be able to make the money revenue we need, and that sort of thing?
That is a really good question. I'm going to turn to Laura if she might have some data that could help with that particular question. I wasn't here through all of it, to be candid, but I've known about this project for quite a while.
Well, and I confess that I haven't been around for the history of this whole project either. And so Andreas, who's listening, I'm sure would be happy to follow up with you after this meeting with some additional information. But as we are making service planning decisions, you know, we look at a whole variety of factors. We look at projected ridership, we look at density, we look at population demographics, socioeconomic information. We look at how walkable an area is. So can people access the public transit infrastructure easily? Or are there a lot of barriers? And so we look at a whole bunch of different factors as we are planning out projects like this. Oftentimes, you know, the Ogden BRT project was kind of an obvious one because we had a bus route that was very successful. Local bus route that was, you know, very productive, had lots of great ridership, and our data was showing that we had underserved that area. And so we thought that, you know, that a little bit better service on that corridor might serve the community better. And so we look at all of this data as we're making those decisions. In terms of timing, oftentimes it's just kind of when the project comes together. There's a lot of work that goes into developing these projects, from concept to the environmental study to applying for federal grants. And sometimes it's just a matter of when we're able to pull the resources together in order to produce it. But you will see in the regional transportation plans that we have phased projects. We have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 projects. Sometimes, for example, in Roy City, we've identified that you really could use some better bus service as your community grows and expands. We can't afford to do it right now. And so we look at, okay, when is it needed? And then when do we think we'll have the resources in order to fund it? And so through the RTP planning process, first we phase them by need, and then we apply a second level of when do we think the resources will be available to make it happen. So it's an interesting and complex project, and there's no straightforward answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
It's a great question, though.
I have a question. As we look at high density, do you have the ability to, I don't know, quantify, I guess, what part of your ridership in certain areas comes from high density housing?
That is a good question. I think, and I will let Laura answer because she is obviously the master in this, but I will say though that one of the things that we do look at when we look at density is that accessibility portion of that. And just because it is more dense and you do look at that certain number of population, you know that they're going to be trying to get somewhere else and they'll just be higher levels. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura.
Yeah, I think Trustee Holbrook answered it correctly. There's no real, like, 30% of our ridership comes from this type of development. We don't really have that kind of metric, but it's the more people that are surrounding transit, the more likelihood there is need for travel and mobility, and therefore a higher likelihood is going to be riding public transit. Also, if you live in a higher density type development, you're less likely to own your own car. A lot of apartment buildings have parking spaces for just one vehicle rather than two. And so a household may require one person to use public transit periodically. And so it's the reason that higher density leads to higher ridership typically on public transit is because it's in a location where there's a mix of a lot of uses, and so people can make short trips to meet all of their daily needs. They're less likely to need to own a vehicle, and there's just more people, which means more potential riders.
And to kind of finish that thought that Laura articulated, one of the things that that was just pointed out with Mr. Becker's presentation is that when you also are looking at your locations, specifically density, but also just in general, when you're looking at those locations, you want to make sure that you're getting a mixed use residential. You want to make sure that you're getting access to amenities like grocery, for instance, or some other things like childcare, other elements that in a denser environment, you want to have accessibility to. Part of the reason that there is this attraction is the lifestyle, if you will, which is a little harder to quantify, but it is one of the reasons that people look at these types of developments. Certainly there's others, financial as well, but you want to have that accessibility element. And part of that is making sure that your mixed use is accommodating what that area would like.
Okay, Council, great comments. Anything else you'd like to ask UTA relative to the presentation or anything else?
I was just going to ask, this probably a silly question, but if we got a lot of multi-use housing for Northrop Grumman, all those people coming to work at Hillfield, would you ever provide bus service from a housing unit to Hillfield? Is that something that you're not allowed to do?
That is a great question. And we would definitely want to look to doing something if there is more development in the future. And let me just kind of give it a little background. About 3 years ago, ish, give or take, there was a lot of discussion about how can we get people from maybe Front Runner to Hill Air Force Base? What could we do? And as you alluded to, and you're correct, we do have limitations because we are not allowed onto Hill Air Force Base because of security reasons. And So we did implement a bus service that would at least drop them through the gate, but we were very limited. We could only go through the gate, drop everyone off, and then turn around. And that's great if you are in that location. But if you are beyond and you know how large Hill Air Force Base is, it does get a little cumbersome. And then, so we found that that was not serving the needs very well. One of the things that I think the Northrop Grumman development will do, certainly when we get to a post-COVID environment, is that there will be a development over time of individuals that are going to this area. The key difference is that they're not on Hill Air Force Base land. They're on private land owned through MIDA. That allows us much more flexibility. So when we start to see that level of connectivity in an area where we don't have security issues or other elements, that can change the dynamic. And then we look at that and see, well, we could really develop a ridership area here where we could not have done that in the past. I hope that that helps kind of give you some perspective. Good question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great
With
question.
that, Mayor, would you like me to go to answer some of those questions, or
Yeah,
did you,
if,
I didn't
if you
want
have
to.
time.
You
But
bet.
let me share a thought with you if I can. They're good questions, but just counsel, so you understand, there's a lot of dynamics happening in the legislature right now. I've been at this for a few years now, and I've never ever seen so many different things taking place. And surely some of the things we're hearing about and what they're proposing and what they're considering have a lot of influence in terms of UTA. And just preface that when I'm hearing things, $200 million being considered to do a double track, that is absolutely significant, absolutely significant. And again, the expectation, Beth, would be is that, man, we got to improve the ridership. If we're going to invest that kind of money, we really want to move the population up and down the Wasatch Front. So they're the dynamics. But Beth, you brought up an interesting point when you responded to me. Lots of things that are being considered right now are still in consideration. They're very strong. They're moving in the right direction, we think, but they're still considering. Maybe the question ought to be is said, Beth, and I'll look at your time, it's up to you, but maybe if you don't mind, would you come back? Would you be willing to come back to this council? And I suspect a lot of other councils, or maybe tell me you're going to be in the Utah League of Cities and Towns presentation that talk about what these legislative things, if they get approved, are going to do to you and how they're going to influence us. A lot of it's speculative right now. The questions I ask you were speculative, but if they are approved, okay, then Beth, your world is going to get real interesting, and we really want to know more about it. And I guess the point would be is we can talk about those things, or just make me a promise that once we get some solid ground on legislation that's been approved, you come back and let's really delve into these things, because I think the questions they ask you and a lot more are really relevant to Royce City and just about any city in the state.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That is an excellent preface. And I would be happy to. I would pledge right now to come back once we know more of how this legislative session ends and talk more in depth about some of these proposals that are going through the legislature right now. The mayor brings up an excellent point. These everything is fluid until it's a done deal, is kind of how I look at things. And I will say that the legislature has been such a great partner to have these discussions with, and to really want to understand and develop more of the public transit elements to this, the front runner investment, the zoning investments and other elements, to really maximize what we again know is very geographically confined areas that we all have. And I think that these are going to be fantastic discussions. And so I will be happy to do that. I do intend to go to the league as well. So I don't know if they'll give me anything official, but I will be happy to talk in detail to the best of my ability as to what we could see moving forward.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I recommend, I sent you all a note this morning, the league will be holding its conference. There will be both the virtual and on-site, but I have found in those conferences, we gain such an interesting perspective to recently passed legislation and how it's going to impact us. And then we bring that information back to the city and ingrain it into our policies and our plans. But I will tell you, just the things I'm hearing that's going to involve UTA, is pretty impressive. There's a lot of dynamics here. And if they get past, Beth, I'm telling you, we could probably spend a couple hours just talking about how do we prepare, what do we need to do, and how do we play in part of that partnership with you to make this work. So maybe the answer, if you're okay, Council, is let's invite both Beth and Laura back. Let's see what they got the firm grounds we have on legislation. Once that happens, then let's come in with some questions that are dynamic. And if you're like me, I'll just give you a couple numbers. Watch Senate Bill 217. Watch Senate Bill 217. That's an interesting one, and I'm waiting to kind of see what happens with that one, and that will definitely change some of the things that we're doing. So I watch that one very closely. It's pushing the edge of the possibilities, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens with that. Any other questions for UTA? Okay, hearing none. Beth, Laura, thank you so much. Okay, very informative. I will ask, as it was just recently mentioned briefly, we are evolving our general plan. I heard a welcome in a previous discussion that says we should be collaborating our general plan amendments with UTA and see how it all kind of fits together as we look out 10 to 15 years. And so as we get closer, as we start to look at fine tuning our general plan, we'd like to obviously get you involved and help us to make sure we're doing it right. So thank you again, and thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful.
Thank you
Steve,
very much, Mayor, and thank you, Council. We appreciate it.
Steve, you have a question?
No, I was just, Mayor, I just wanted to let you know, I already have sent it off to UTA for them to look at. So
Perfect.
We're already ahead of the game.
Perfect. That's excellent. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Laura. Wonderful. Great presentation.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Council, we have Fire Chief Golden is going to share some thoughts with us. Chief, go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, Council, we have actually had some changes going on in our department recently, as you know, and one specifically is we've had the opportunity to promote Roy City's first ever battalion chief, and that's Jake Rass sitting here to my right. He just in a short period of time, he's been very effective, but I'd like to introduce him. You know, his wife's very supportive. Her name's Michaela. They've got a one-year-old at home, and Jake's been in the fire service for 12 and a half years and 8.5 of that here at Roy as a full-time firefighter. So he's done great things, establishing a health and safety for firefighter program, a risk management plan. He's already established a health and safety committee. And we're also, as the training, the other piece that he's over, we start as of next week, we start some airport training along with Ogden and Hill Air Force Base that he's already coordinated to include local aircraft as well as some of the stuff that we have at Hill Air Force Base. So he's done great things and for the department already in the short period of time, and great to have a new chief officer in our department. Behind that, we were able to promote Josh Gorder to captain. He's taken over A shift here at Station 31, and he actually has his wife Nikki. I think they're on the line and on YouTube, and he's got two boys, Gunnar and Gage. And he's been with us nearly 10 years and with Roy as well. He's going to be taking over our vehicle program and our equipment program. So he already put him to work in his short period of time. And right behind him, we were able to promote an engineer. The crazy thing about the engineer is Brady King. He was actually told he was selected as our newest engineer the day after his wife gave birth to the third son. So congratulate him and his wife on the birth of their son as well, and welcome to their third boy to their family. So a lot of stuff and a lot of challenges for him to do when he gets back to work. So I congratulate all three of these gentlemen in their accomplishments, and present to you, the council, if you have anything for them or myself to answer, we'd open that up to any questions or comments.
Sounds like you have future employees.
Right. I think we need a baby shower.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, a great comment. Council. Go ahead, Joe Paul, we didn't hear you.
I appreciate the new leadership and the dedication of the department. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Council, other comments?
Just congratulations.
Yeah.
Guys are good.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. That's great to see you in this leadership roles and help us to be better. Obviously, it's great to keep your talents here and truly draw upon obviously the staff as well as the city council to figure out how we can make your life even better. So welcome to the team. It's great to have you. Other comments, council? Okay, with that, Chief, thank you again. Okay, congratulations to all involved. We couldn't be happier. It sounds like what I'm hearing is that you made a lot of promotions within. And so that's always good. I've always thought that we should look internal and do the best we can to consider the internal candidates and the qualifications. And it sounds like you did just that. And equally important, you've promoted some great people into better opportunities. So I like that. That's perfect. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, council, we got a couple of discussions we need to work through. So if you would with me, let's go ahead and move to our next set. We've got 2 action items we need to talk about and see if we can get your vote on. They're associated with the elements we've been doing for the last year and a half. In fact, I think the total time invested in these 2 issues we're about to consider voting on have been in play for about 2.5 years now, both the Planning Commission. I was told recently there's been well over 20 public meetings that we've had, some great work sessions. It's been an interesting discussion and equally important, a refining process. So Steve, if you'd like to just basically start the discussion again, let's go ahead and address ordinance 21-3 and if necessary, ordinance 21-4.
I'm not sure how much you want me to present. I know I kind of talked about it last council meeting. I can do the presentation over again about the 2 ordinance numbers and what they involve. It really comes down to what you would like me to do.
Council, anything based on anything we've talked about? We just finished a meeting prior to this meeting on the topic. Is there anything you'd like to discuss before I go for a motion?
Maybe just discuss the 2 main changes that we covered in the work session, because I think other than that, everything pretty much stayed the same.
Okay, give me a sec. Let me bring that up. And then I'll share my screen. Okay, so council kind of recognize that table. So again, the changes from the last work session we had last Tuesday, some of the concern was setbacks, changing that from 10 to 15. As it's indicated here, we just indicated that as well, but also the thing that really comes into play is along Riverdale Road, 1900 West and 5600 South, there was an automatic, you couldn't have a 0 setback. It had to be a certain, 10 feet. In this case, we'll change it to 15. That setback can be landscaping all by itself, patio space, where they can put tables and chairs, or outdoor display type items, or just increase the size of the sidewalk. So that gives them a lot of opportunity to do some things outside, which we currently don't have. Another big thing that was talked about during that last meeting is the height of buildings. There was some concern that if they could build an 80-foot tall building right next to the road, in this case 15 feet away, you kind of get that tunnel effect. So what the council kind of looked at and asked about is a transition between the property or the road and where the building could start at 80 feet. And granted, 80 feet is only in one particular portion of the zone at the downtown east, which would be between Riverdale Road, 1900 West, and I-15. It does go down a little bit south of 56 as well, but everything is east of 1900 West. Well, that is 100 feet from back of curb. The building cannot be any taller than 60 feet, but after that 100-foot transition, then it could go up the additional 20 feet that's allowed in that zone. Again, that's throughout all building types in that zone. The other two zones that are downtown already have a limit of 60 feet or 40 feet, depending on which one you're in. So we didn't apply that to that transition to those zones.
Okay, great rundown, Steve. Council, any questions for Steve? Okay, thank you. Then council, do I have a motion to approve ordinance 21-3 to amend the Roy City Municipal Code, Title 10, zoning regulations, amending Chapter 6, establishing a zoning district, amending Chapter 10, general property development standards, adding a Chapter 13, mixed use, amending Chapter 17, table of use, also Table 17-2, non-residential zoning districts, amending Chapter 19, off-street parking and loading, and Table 19-1, off-street parking requirements, and amending Chapter 31 for definitions. You've had copies of all that. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, Joe. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Morgan, this is a roll call vote. Are you on, Morgan? I think she's off.
Looks like she's going on and off mute.
He keeps going off and on.
Yeah, I think she's probably off. Go ahead, Morgan. Matt, I need to have you.
Online voice-wise, because there's not a little microphone on the bottom of her screen.
Yeah. Matt, I may ask you to go ahead and call for a roll call vote in light of the fact that Morgan is struggling to try to get on. You're
Matt,
on mute.
Mute.
Still on mute, Matt.
All right, you should hear me now.
I
Right?
can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull up a randomizer real quick. Actually, do you want to do Morgan on the speakerphone from my phone? She already has it.
Yeah, she's got it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Morgan, you're on speaker. Just turn down your volume.
I'm so sorry.
You're good. You're on speaker. I'm on. Just turn down your volume. You can do it from there.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, I don't know why. I think my computer just sits idle, so it just stops working. I can see all of you. I can hear all of you just fine.
Okay.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson.
Nay.
Councilmember Burrell.
Aye.
Councilmember Saxton.
Nay.
Councilmember Paul.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. We've got, with that, we have to also, and now can consider ordinance 21-4. This one deals with the zoning map. So with that then, do I have a motion then to approve ordinance 21-4 to amend the zoning map from R2 medium density residential, R3 high density residential, R4 high density residential, and RC regional commercial to CC, which is community commercial, DTE, which is downtown east, DTW, which is downtown west, and DTG, which is downtown gateway, for multiple properties located downtown. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I? Okay, I got that one from Ann. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Okay. This is also a roll call vote. Morgan?
Councilmember Wilson,
Nay.
Councilmember Paul,
Yes.
Councilmember Saxton,
Nay.
Councilmember Burrell,
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. Okay, thanks, Morgan, for working around that. That's perfect. Council, we do have an opportunity for public comment. Morgan, do we have anybody who wanted to make public comment? No? Okay. I checked earlier, we didn't have anybody for public comment, so we'll just go ahead and move from there. Matt, city manager's report.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things for us all. The Parks and Recreation Department has been working on doing our annual Easter egg hunt. We're shooting for the 3rd of April at 10 a.m. We've been working very, very close with our health department. In fact, the plan was submitted to them on what we wanted to do. Planning on doing it George Wallen North Park. Different things that would happen this year versus other years is there's going to be a lot more social distancing, obviously masks required. Typically the kids are fairly close together, but we'll be utilizing more of our field, so they're going to be more spread out. Also, we're going to be looking for a pre-registration as well. So stay tuned for that. We still need to hear back from the final say of the health department, but we are pushing for that.
Perfect, thank you.
And a big thank you for Waste Management. They're also on board for donating $3,000 for the event. So big thanks to them. I also wanted to talk about the street on 4700 South. There is a road 47 that goes from 1900 West down to the complex or down to Roy High School. This road is going to be under construction. The construction that's going to be taking place is Roy Secondary Water is going to be replacing some of the water lines through there. Secondary water is also going to be notifying the residents of this road work. We will be posting online when it comes closer. It's going to start possibly the end of next week, the first of the following week. But we'll put something out online as well for that. But as you know, it's going to create havoc for the school district with Roy High.
Matt, has the school been notified?
We will make sure they'll get notified, yes, because that's going to be, there's a lot of buses and things that go out there. Yes. We'll make sure that happens as well. And then also, I wanted to talk a little bit about Mayor's email. 2021 ULCT is going forth with their mid-year conference. This is very beneficial to council members. A lot of useful tools are talked about there. So just as far as registration, just let Morgan or I know about it. The sooner we book hotels and things like that, the better pricing we can get. We have good relations with a hotel down there that we'll stay in contact with. So anyway, that's it for me. And then I will be sure to make sure Roy High School is aware of that as well. I'll call the principals over there. So
perfect. Okay, thank you, Matt. Council, do you have any questions for Matt or anything you'd like to see the city do?
I have a comment, Mayor.
Please.
With the CARES Act money, Roy partnered with the ALCAP facility and has some, I don't know, machines or whatever you want to call them that they're going to work with. They partnered with them and they're ready to deliver them. The director has asked that some of us get together and go and deliver that. They would like to show you their facility. We've never had a really chance to tour that. So if there's a time, and when I spoke with the director, she said she would be willing to make it available to us at the time that's most convenient for the most members of our council. But they would like to show us their facility because it certainly looks different, a little different than Discount Tire inside. So is there a time that would be best? I mean, obviously they're very, very aware of COVID precautions and work within those every day. So
Could you and Morgan kind of reach out to all the council members, see if we can coordinate a time that works? There is a program that I've used. I have not used it, but I've been party to, where they send out an email, more or less a calendar, and you kind of pick the hours and days. I found that to be very helpful. But maybe something like that, or maybe just some phone calls with some available dates, and we can try to get us all together. As many as we can.
Next week or so. Okay.
Okay, and coordinate with Jan.
And if you can't, that's understandable. I mean, don't make it, you know, let's not put it out forever.
Yeah.
But if we could get as many there as we can, they really want to show us their facility. I mean, they are a strong addition to the services of our citizens. So
that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Okay. Anything else, council? Anything else you want to share? Anything you'd like to see done? Brian?
Just FYI, the 7-Eleven on Midland is now open for business, and there is a eatery, a food service business inside of Ocean Mart that is separate of Ocean Mart. And they had a grand opening last week, and I was not able to make it. Don't know if the mayor made it, but they are open for business. It's called Spiced Chicks, and it's spelled CHIX, and they are in the Ocean Mart. Anyway, just thought I
What exactly is it? Do they sell food, or what exactly is it?
They sell spicy chicken sandwiches and spicy chicken fingers, I think they're called.
Oh.
And they opened on Friday. They called. Morgan actually sent me an email, but I wasn't able to get up there in time. We're going to be doing a video of both new businesses that BAB is going to be putting together. So anyway, but I just thought.
Is it just takeout, or is it a sit-down place?
It's both.
It's both? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah. If you like spicy chicken, it's probably, besides Chick-fil-A, it's probably the best.
I was waiting for that when you said chicken, because I figured with your family owning the one in Layton, you had to make sure you're careful how you said that. Steve popped on. Steve, do you have something to share with us?
Well, Ocean Mart also has several other little eateries that are to the right of, if you go in to the right, that, you know, Korean food, Thai food and stuff. So they have quite a bit. They can't sit down.
A little food court.
Yeah. Can't sit down right now because of COVID, but it's there.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. Okay, anything else? I've just got a couple of things I'd like to share with you. Okay, first is I see some other department heads. Thank you for the secondary water construction. Is there anything in the department heads map that they want to share with the council about upcoming projects or anything that were in work besides the one that's going to take place on 4700 South?
Ross is actually at a training and he does most of the projects around the city,
Yeah.
so he's unavailable right now.
Okay, I just want to give that opportunity to voice if there happened to be something out there we'd be aware of. Travis, Matt, a couple of things. We had our meetings with the county and the other mayors, and it looks like all the mayors are going full steam preparing to do parades, fireworks. Uinta's going to do a salmon bake. Does this kind of sound like a Roy Days event to you? It's coming and they're going to be doing it. So the only requirement we have, and you're already working that one, obviously, with the Easter egg hunt, is let's coordinate those efforts with the health department. But right now, council, all indications are we might be moving back into a normal summer, fall kind of events. I would ask Matt, if you don't mind, when you work with your department heads, if you're planning and doing it, moving in that direction, please, if you can, come and bring a message to the council of what you're thinking you'd like to do. And let's make sure you're aware of it and make sure you get a green line. But for Ann, I believe you're working this year on the Roy Days. I will indicate to you there's other cities are moving out and they plan to do it. So we just need to understand what the city wants to do and let the council kind of know what they're doing and support it. So if you help us on that.
Mayor, if you don't mind,
please.
We are definitely moving toward a Roy Days activity that is being slightly modified based on COVID protocols and different things like that, where we're going to be at that time. There may be some additions and there may be some subtractions, and we'll just kind of follow the health department's lead and decide where that's going to end up. But we are definitely planning on it, and staff has worked very hard and is working very hard to make sure we have a great activity for the community.
That's great information here. Thank you, Travis. And everybody who's listening today, let them know we're going to try to move back as close as normal as we possibly can. So excellent. Thank you. Okay. Last comment, if you don't mind, Matt, other institutions are starting to move back to normal. You and I are aware that the Hope Center now is bringing in classes. We're starting to see some dynamic changes that are occurring across the municipalities. We're seeing it definitely at the state level. I want to make sure that we're cautious, council, but I think if you can, Matt, and council, give me your input on this. If Matt would be willing to provide us a reopening of Roy City administration, Roy City operations plan. No, I'm not suggesting that it happened tomorrow. I'm not even suggesting it happens next month or in 2 months. But Matt, if you can help us understand as we start now moving into this, hopefully all the indicators are showing that the COVID pandemic is slowing, but we want to be cautious. But would you consider bringing us a plan of when we'll basically allow people, residents back into administration, back into the normal kinds of things they like this municipality to provide. And by the way, before you think we need to rely upon what the state has defined in terms of the high, moderate, and low, I have reviewed that a half a dozen times. There really isn't any clear guidance in terms of what gets us back to normal, in my opinion, anywhere written except this. When the governor of the state of Utah says you can go back to normal. And yet what I'm seeing is there is this natural movement. A lot of people are doing it, a lot of organizations doing it to get us back. People are asking that. You can go into Weber County right now, and I'll tell you, Weber County is pretty well almost back to normal. Still keep the distances, still keep the protocol masks. Those are mandated, but you can walk into those buildings. If Matt, you can come back to the council and give us an idea what your vision is and how we're going to get there, we appreciate that. Is that okay, council? Everybody okay with that idea?
Yeah, and just to kind of give you some insight on that, Mayor, that's some of the struggles that we're having, is there's been no clear direction. The administrative office of the courts have done a really good job of what they want to see in order to open up our courts. We kind of abide by them as well. So our last meeting actually is just this morning on this very topic. We're meeting tomorrow as well about it. So we're looking at different things. We just don't want to, we're no experts on the topic of, so we want to kind of lean on these experts from the health department in different places. So that's what we're trying to do. But yes,
yeah.
We can do a plan.
Okay. Yeah, and that just give us an idea what you think, and then we can report back to our residents that simply says we think about this particular time under these kind of conditions, we'll be ready to make that transition. And it may very well be, Matt, at the end of the day, certain organizations are much more better to make a more effective transition, and others may take a little bit longer, and that's okay. Just as you see it and your department heads see it, let's see if we can't put a plan together, okay? Okay, with that, council, anything else you'd like to share?
I was just wondering, when,
Please.
do you have the dates for when the Roy City dumps will be open? I've had a couple of neighbors ask me, is that the end of April, 1st of April?
Yeah, I not off the top of my head, I'll get them out. They're on our website as well, but I can
Oh.
text them.
Most of my neighbors don't have internet.
Oh, okay, yes, I'll text them over to you.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry,
Okay.
Councilmember Burrell, you're on mute.
Will that be in Roy Connection as well?
Yeah, we'll put
Or
some.
will we miss that?
I'll have to get with Morgan, to see if it was in there or not, but yeah, I believe.
I know we have a high readership on that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay, council, thank you. Good meeting. We got a lot accomplished, good information shared. Do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Jan, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Ann, thank you. And all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. I'll give you, if you can, about 5 minutes, if you would, and transfer over to the RDA board meeting. We've got a couple things we want to share.